how do you view the general state of the planet, both socially, environmentally? I mean, how do you see where things are at this moment in time?
I see things from a vantage of my age, which I'm 83 years old. And I remember what the world was like at least 80 years ago or 79 years ago. I can remember that the earth itself was whole. And even though as I grew and recognized that politics was corrupt in Louisiana, where I was raised, that the earth was whole. And so as I grew older even, and there were all kinds of headlines and gossip and turmoil over the political structure of Louisiana, I didn't feel worried in the sense that the earth itself was threatened. And my father was a fundamentalist minister, so I was raised in the church. But this didn't satisfy me because I was very much attracted to the physical world, even as a child. And we lived in the country. You couldn't help but be connected to and attracted to the physical world. That's all that we knew. And to me, that was more spiritual than the church was. But nevertheless, this was my background, and it was okay until the politics became, instead of just being local, it became global, and brought enormous destruction not only to our state, to the United States. It was bringing destruction to the world. It's when I immigrated to Canada in 1966 with my family. I'm very worried about the state of the world now because the earth itself is threatened. It was Dr. Lovelock who wrote about deep ecology and Gaia. The Revenge of Gaia was the name of one of his books, and deep ecology. And I realized this is what I had always been, was a deep ecologist and eco-feminist, really, because I believe that because women do give birth, that they connect with the earth in a somewhat different way than men do, and that the knowledge that the earth was a whole entity, or the belief that the earth was an entire entity, that it lived and breathed as an entire entity, was an ancient belief. And that I think this has to come back into human consciousness, that the earth is a being of itself, and that when we disrespect the earth with mining, horrendous mining and logging and destruction of the waters, that the earth, Gaia, does have the power to enforce her own laws, and she will. And it's this enforcement of her laws that it keeps me awake at night, because I'm fearful of what this is going to bring into the future unless we stop the damage and the destruction of this body of the earth, which is a sacred body. It gives life. It gives us connection with everything. Without it, we don't even exist. We have to love and respect and take care of the earth.
So why do you think we've lost that connection? How did we lose that connection as a species?
We lost this connection back prior to the Industrial Revolution. Some of the philosophers started backing away from the idea that the earth was an whole entity. They started talking about, well, you could isolate certain sections of the earth and study them and manipulate them to the point where you could have industry that would be beneficial to humankind because it would bring jobs and wealth. And so there was a gradual disassociation between industry and the concept of Earth as being a sacred entity, that you approach destruction of it with extreme caution. And now there is absolutely no hesitancy on the part of the industry to do things like the oil sands, our fracking, this fracking method that they're using over the United States and Canada, which is a huge destruction of the earth and the water tables and the entire flora and fauna of the area. Is just enormously destructive. From what I have seen, I believe it to be even worse than the oil sands in terms of destruction and the amounts of water and energy and that's used. So yes, there has now been a complete disassociation, and it's come at a time where the capitalistic method of economy is also tipping over, because the industry corporations, they're digging their own grave with the methods that they're using of just looking at the bottom line and putting in more machinery and more electronics and letting workers go, until it's tipped the other way now. Workers, they're being really, they're being dispensed with. How many workers does it take to punch a button on a machine? But who's going to buy the products that the machine makes is the huge problem. And Jeremy Griffin wrote about this, The End of Work, 10, 12 years ago, that this huge problem now exists with employment of people, particularly young men who have been manipulated out of jobs that they have historically been used for. And now that they're no longer needed for those jobs, they're being declared redundant. And the economic system has come to screeching dead end. We either have to make these changes of respecting the earth, and of governments respecting the earth and respecting people. Governments that don't respect the people don't respect the earth. And we need now is a spiritual awakening to the fact that the earth is our mother and our father. The earth is all there is for us. And these old hymns that drove me away from the church when I was a child, that would read, this world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. That kind of never said right. How can it not be our home? Of course it's our home. This is where we were born, it's where we live, it's where we will die. And we will refurnish the earth with a spirit and with life of one form or another. And of course it's our home, and we have to treat it like our home. And any animal that's being deprived of its homeland, that sees its homeland being destroyed, will grieve. And that's what we're doing right now as a species. We're grieving because our homeland is being destroyed. And it's manifested itself in depression, in pills that people take, and the amount of alcohol they consume, and the amount of illegal drugs they consume.
So one thing that you mentioned about women having a special relationship with the earth. I don't know if you're aware. I've heard that the Iroquois had the grandmother's lodge, and these were women that were postmenopausal women, and they were the final word. Like for instance, when the chiefs got together and made their decisions on what was best for the tribes, it would have to go through the grandmother's lodge because they were considered the ones that were the best ones to know what impact this would have on their environment, basically. So anything that the chiefs decided would have to go through the grandmother's lodge to be approved or disapproved or to be adjusted. And I thought that was, how enlightened is that? Hey? What an enlightened culture. I guess that's why Native culture is so respected now amongst the movement towards a different awareness of the earth. And it seems almost like what you're saying, that to recognize the earth as a living being for some is just so far out there. I mean, there's no respect for the life that we do decide is life. It's a tough one, isn't it?
It's terribly tough, but I'm glad you mentioned that because the Iroquois was highly respected by the world as it came to learn about how it was organized. And actually, the signers of the Declaration of Independence looked at the Iroquois Nation and the way they set up their government, and they adopted many of their rules and their laws, except the Council of Women. They did not accept that. They were not prepared to go that far, that that property people could be citizens and they could be free slaves even, who could buy their way into freedom. There was never going to be freedom for women, real freedom for women. And that was decided at that Declaration of Independence when they scratched out, no, we're not going to include the Women's Council.
Well, they didn't get the vote till the 20s or something, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And at least a lot of things have changed for the better.
Yes, and actually, had I been I was born in 1928, and had I been born in Canada, I wouldn't even have been considered a legal person, because it wasn't until 1929 that the Privy Council of England overturned the Supreme Court of Canada's decision that said no, women were not persons. It said, oh, come on, guys. Yeah, they're, come on. They have to be persons. If they're not persons, we're not persons. So in 1929, women became legally documented as persons in the Constitution, or in the laws that at this time were the main rules and regulations of Canada. And I tease Madam Justice McLaughlin with this because she is the one who has left terrible rulings on civil disobedience, because she used to be the Chief Justice of BC. And I'm always convicted under her ruling, which says that if a blockade is open, continuous, and flagrant, that's criminal contempt. And that's what I get sent to prison on, is criminal contempt. That's a ruling left by her. So when I'm in jail, I talk about and tell that I wrote this letter to Madam Justice McLaughlin and said, Madam, if it hadn't been for a lot of, you're so hard on civil disobedience, if it hadn't been for a lot of gutsy women in Canada and the United States and England who were willing to use civil disobedience and be jailed and force-fed and humiliated, you wouldn't be Chief Justice of Canada. You wouldn't even be a lawyer. You would be home cooking your husband's soup.
What was her response to that?
No response.
Oh, wow. That's a great argument. Yeah. So, going back to your youth, what was your experience as a child of being in the world?
I had, in many ways, just an ideal childhood in that we lived in this world. We lived on the edge of a swamp way outside Baton Rouge. And Mom and Daddy had, they farmed, had a little farm. We grew everything we ate. My father also had a small business, a little mercantile business that he operated from his car, really. But I grew up in this world that I look back on it, and I would hope that every child would have this kind of connection with the natural world, because in Louisiana during those days it was wetlands. Didn't have to walk very far before we were at water's edge, and there were all these wonderful wetlands and streams, and there were huge cypress groves and live oak groves that grew on the water's edge, and there were huge numbers of birds. Sometimes the sky would almost be dark with migrating birds, and there were pelicans. My heavens to Betsy, who was on the beach. You know, a pelican was it's like a, you know, you walk out and you see crows or whatever. And food, I've often thought in those days that nobody would be hungry in southern Louisiana because it was full of shellfish and fish of every kind, and you didn't have to hardly walk any pace before you were in grabbing distance of something good to eat, you know, so that people used to run away from the law. They'd just head for the swamps because you could survive beautifully in the swamp with some matches and a knife and a little pirogue, maybe a little boat that you could, you know, go around the swamp in. It was just a boat where you had a big stick that you propelled yourself along. Yes, you didn't even need a gun. You didn't, you could live with that, but that's not true now. That's not true now. Half of Louisiana's wetlands are gone. They've been replaced by oil rigs, offshore oil rigs, and gambling casinos. So that when Katrina came in over New Orleans, that's what they had to stop it, instead of all of these wetlands that soak up the water and mitigate the winds and hold it back, and oil rigs and gambling casinos don't hold back hurricanes and floods. And so that's what is there now in southern Louisiana and all along the Gulf of Mississippi and through Georgia, you know, all along the Gulf Coast. It's being decimated. And for the first time a couple of years ago in living memory, southern Louisiana had a drought. That's unheard of. Southern Louisiana is a rainforest like it is here out in Clagett Sound and these other places. So it's hugely depressing. And however, you just have to have faith that Gaia has her own methods of sustaining herself, and she has her own ways of enforcing her laws, and she will enforce them. And she's doing it now in reaction, it's true, to what industry is doing to the earth. But male sperm count has dropped 50% in the last 50 years through the use of chemicals. The willy-nilly use of chemicals. The chemical companies have so much power, they just can overrule Congress. They overwhelm Congress with money, okay? Oh, this doesn't need, and the the institutions that are supposed to look at what they're spewing out on the public. Money rules the health of the nation in the United States and increasingly in Canada. And these things are affecting the health of people. Phthalates, you've heard of phthalates? Now there's just a new report come out that says that in the States they've seen that mothers, after a 3-year study, have a lot of these in their body. Their children also have a lot of these in their body, and that they're not doing well. That is, their learning capacity is being hampered. So if what the capitalist system, in the way that it has allowed corporations to buy off democracy, if that is the norm, then what is happening is that our children and grandchildren are not only going to be less prosperous and have less money, and they're also going to be less intelligent, a lot of them, if these research patterns hold true in the aggregate. So yes, there's a lot for a great-grandmother to worry about. I'll tell you.
How do you deal with sort of, I mean, you don't seem like you live with despair, but how do you live with the sort of living in a world that's almost insane to how you see things really ought to be?
Because once you feel connected to the concept of the notion that everything is connected, you do feel connected to other people, aside from feeling connected to the earth and the natural world. And as I see it, it's a self-correcting process that's guided by evolution. If people, the human race, is going to allow the earth to be destroyed by a few people, alpha males primarily, who just want more territory, more power, more money, more women. We can't forget that. Then they'll be wiped out. Because aside from the drop in the sperm count, the chromosomes of male sperm now is creating more XXs than XYs. And it seems as though, tentatively, that the future is going to just produce more females than males, simply because of the chemicals that's been put into the culture, to the life of the race by these same corporations. So I do have a hope that it will correct itself, because we're the voice of nature too, you know. And we're asking for a correction here. We want a correction. We want a different kind of life, something that is not gauged by money and power and rugged individualism. We want communities that are connected with the other communities, that are connected to the earth, that's connected to sanity and to care for children, for the elderly, for the earth, for care, love. We're asking for, my heavens to Betsy, love. Is that impossible? You know, people love all the time. We all love. There's no human being that there isn't somebody at some time they must have loved. And it's a human thing. Love is human, just as greed is human. We need a society that is geared to and structured so that people can act in loving ways. Eric Fromm's Fromm said in one of his books that the opposite of love is not hate but indifference, because even hatred implies some connection. Indifference is you just simply don't care. And that's what we're getting from governments, from industry. They just really don't care. And that's the opposite of love. And it's very difficult to act loving in an unloving society. So we have to not just create it from inside ourselves, but we have to create institutions that allow us to act in new ways towards each other.
I also wanted to ask you about the concept of breaking the law to make a statement, to
Yes.
follow your conscience.
Yes.
I know that someone was some well-known scientist in Washington or in the States was really promoting to break the law to state their case. And
Yes.
obviously you've faced that quandary and you've
Yes. And, pardon?
no,
Go ahead. Well, I was happy to see that Naomi Klein was one of the ones arrested down there over the pipeline. The issue, though, that I would like to bring of civil disobedience is one of sustained civil disobedience. If you say you're going to protest for 2 weeks and that's it, it's like saying longshoremen saying, well, we're going to go on strike for 2 weeks and that's it. If you're going to use civil disobedience, it has been my, let's just say it's my way of seeing civil disobedience and all that I've read of civil disobedience. The black people didn't say, well, we're going to do civil disobedience for 2 weeks. They said we're going to protest until we get what we have to have as human beings. The women suffragettes didn't say, well, we're going to protest for 2 weeks because we want the vote. But they say, we're going to stand out here, we're going to go to jail until we get the bloody vote. And that's all there is to it, is that we have to come to that frame of mind about civil disobedience here. George Bernard Shaw said a thing that tickled me. He says that the fact of the matter is that one has to decide how important this is to you and come to a decision that it is worth your life. When you can come to that point, then you're ready to do civil disobedience. If you say, I will stand out here until something changes. And this is easier, I admit, for a person as old as I am, because my life is largely lived. And nevertheless, all kinds of people of all ages do come to these conclusions in different ways over different periods of time. They are doing this now in other countries where people are saying, we want some freedom, we want some democracy, or kill us. You sort of get to that point. And for me here, this is the point that I brought to the courts when I went to the courts on all of the blockades I've been in, and I've spent over 3.5 years in prisons, in courts, and on the blockades themselves, is that do whatever you want because you're wrong. It's not right to deforest the old growth forest of this province. You can't just cut down all of these trees. That's wrong. And you can say the law says it's not wrong all you want to. At this point, the law is wrong. And we've got a bad law going here. And it's not only wrong to cut down the forest, old growth forest of British Columbia, it's wrong of you, the court, to legalize it and say it's okay. It's not okay. And you can do whatever you like. You can't take me out and shoot me, at least not yet. But that's what you would have to do for me to apologize to the court for what I've done, because what I've done is not wrong. It's right. And we all have to get to this point. If we're going to save anything of this earth, if we're going to keep it from slipping into total chaos, environmental and social, political chaos, then we have to get this attitude and get it right and get it going and have groups of people, not just 2 or 3, standing there and saying, we're going to stay here until you stop this mining, till you stop this destruction of the earth and the water systems of the earth, till you stop cutting down the trees. You're cutting down our oxygen, for Pete's sake. You know, you're cutting down friends that we have evolved with. They breathe what we breathe out, and we breathe in what they breathe out. You're taking away our breaths when you take away these old growth trees. And I don't even care that they're on private land. These logging companies here on Vancouver Island own vast acreages of old growth forests that they're now rapidly cutting and sending to China. Raw logs, there's raw logs. And they say, well, this is private property. You can't tell us what to do on private property. And my answer to that is time we reevaluate private property. Why can't we tell you what to do? If it is destroying villages down below where you're clear cutting, if it's ruining the topsoil, if it's getting into the water table, why can't we tell you what to do? We can. We have every moral right to say you cannot destroy the land that we live on and that we take our life and breath from. You just can't do that. We're not going to allow it anymore until we get to this point where there are people who have, and I think that time is coming, because people are getting, it's not just, people in Syria or Egypt and these other places. It's here, and it's going to intensify, which is why Harper's building more prisons. He's got these prisons on the go here. He wants to do this. Why he's privatizing them? It's going to be an industry. Anybody who objects too much, that's where they will wind up. And they try to keep everybody drugged. And now I say this, I know this is, they're not there saying, let's drug them, let's drug them, let's drug them, to shut them up. Nevertheless, pharmacies push all of these. I hardly know anybody who's not taking something for something. And
if it's not that, it's television. I mean,
that's right. Huge. Yeah. Television is really a huge drug.
Masses distracted and
that's right.
Self-absorbed and
absolutely.
Well, I'm hoping this project adds to this idea that now's the time to do something about everything. And that's what I'm hoping that this project does, is inspire people that don't necessarily think about these things.
This is one thing, though, that I want to talk about, because it worries me more than any one specific thing. And this is that the GMOs, the genetically modified organisms, we don't even know when they're in our foodstuffs. We don't know how much of these GMOs we're eating. And the thing that is, to me, the last straw is the GMO salmon that now is being pushed through the United States environmental assessment, food agencies. And the people who are sitting on the board, or not sitting on the board, but who are advising, have all worked for Monsanto at one time or another. Now these fish, they're patented. They have patented a life form. Now that's different, a live animal form. That's different from the grains. We're looking at a gateway of Monsanto and these other huge companies being able to patent other life forms. There's a pig there waiting to be patented. And they're called Frankenfish. They've been dubbed Frankenfish by the U.S. media because they are their genome, their genes have been spliced. And they're injected with eel. There's part eel and part growth hormone so that they can grow up to, there's different information about this out there, but some say 4 times as big as an average salmon. Others say 10 times as big as an average salmon. And they have all these hormones in them. They are not now a real salmon because they're part something else. And they are patented. This is something that is new and for the entire history of the human species that has never been done before, where an animal life form can be patented. Now, if one of these fish should escape their tank and mate with wild fish, they're supposed to be sterilized, but it's not 100%, and mate with a wild salmon, Monsanto or whoever has got the patent on this now can claim, well, all those salmon are theirs, just like they have done corn and soybeans. So it's huge, and this worries me more than anything, and it is so contrary to the notion of life, of evolutionary life. It's so contrary to that. I look at these salmon and I think, I don't believe in the devil. I don't believe in any of these things, but by George, this is evil. This is just pure mitigated evil. They're not called Frankenfish for nothing. You know, they are the pathway to something that could be so enormously damaging to human life, to the natural world.
Well, you know, that was great. There's a lot of great stuff. I thank you very much.